In an alternate version of the United States, in New Rome, powerful elite families rule from the top, indulging in forbidden pleasures while ordinary citizens live in poverty. Caesar climbs to the top of a skyscraper, preparing to jump, but just as he leans over the edge, he suddenly freezes time. He steps back from the brink, then restarts time as if nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, newly elected Mayor Franklyn Cicero listens to a radio report detailing his financial troubles and the growing unrest in the city. As he flips through the morning paper, he's horrified to find scandalous photos of his daughter, Julia. Julia soon stumbles home from a wild party, but her path is blocked by Caesar and members of the city planning commission. They're about to demolish another building to make way for the new city. As the charges go off, Caesar freezes time again for a few brief seconds.
Wait.
Strangely, Julia doesn't freeze like everyone else. She watches the suspended moment unfold around her, wide-eyed with confusion. A couple of seconds later, Caesar restarts time. Police officers quickly approach him, reminding him that Mayor Cicero isn't a fan of his vision for transforming New Rome. Meanwhile, the city buzzes with breaking news. Caesar has been awarded the Nobel Prize for inventing megalon, a revolutionary building material. His popularity among ordinary citizens is on the rise. Even more shocking, his vision for a reimagined New Rome has gained the support of the wealthiest man in history, his uncle, Hamilton Cras III, director of the National Bank. This sends Cicero into a tailspin as his approval ratings continue to nosedive. Soon, the city's elite gather at the site of the recently demolished slums for a high-profile event, covered by ambitious young journalist Wow. Among the arriving guests is Caesar's eccentric cousin, Claudio, who stuns the crowd with his outrageous antics. Cras is troubled by persistent rumors that Claudio is involved in inappropriate relationships with his sisters. He quietly urges his nephew not to disgrace the family name, but Claudio shrugs him off. Not long after, Cicero unveils his plan to build a sleek new casino in the heart of New Rome. But just as he begins his speech, Claudio cuts him off with a dramatic interruption. Then, in a theatrical entrance, Caesar appears, stealing the spotlight. The crowd, especially Cicero's daughter, turns their attention to the famed architect. As head of the city planning commission, Caesar reveals his bold proposal for a rebuilt metropolis. He announces his plan to transform New Rome into a dream city, megalopolis, constructed entirely out of megalon, a material resistant to decay and destruction. But Cicero keeps interrupting, insisting that people don't need dreams, they need stability and practicality. He warns that megalon isn't safe, and says concrete and steel are time-tested, reliable materials. A heated argument erupts. Caesar begins to call out the system itself, condemning it as a structure built for the rich at the expense of everyone else. This enrages the mayor. Cicero steps closer, accusing Caesar of having a hand in his wife's mysterious death. She was poisoned, and her body vanished without a trace. With biting sarcasm, he even suggests Caesar may have used her remains to create megalon. Caesar stays calm, reminding Cicero that he was acquitted in court. But Cicero, who served as the prosecutor in the case, still believes he's guilty. Caesar fires back, calling Cicero the king of the slums. Furious, the mayor lunges at him, and a fight nearly breaks out. But the security team steps in just in time to separate them.
You will never call me that! Easy!
The scene of the frantic Cicero's outburst is immediately captured by dozens of photographers, ignoring Julia's desperate pleas to spare her father's dignity. Next, a fashion show begins, and Julia confides in her friend, admitting that she wants to get revenge on Caesar for how he's treated her father. Claudio, furious about his cousin's skyrocketing popularity, snatches the newspaper with Caesar's portrait right out of the girl's hands. Meanwhile, Caesar returns home, where his lover, Wow, is already waiting for him. She's upset that he hasn't been answering her calls, but the architect is only concerned about the success of his project. Wow, whose career is fading, desperately wants to join the most influential family and begs Caesar to marry her. But as she approaches him, Caesar is suddenly haunted by the memory of his late wife. He pulls away from WOW's advances and walks out. Frustrated, the journalist turns on the TV and lands on a broadcast of her interview with Cras. She notices that the wealthy man had been flirting with her, sparking a new idea on how she might infiltrate his family. The next day, Julia visits Caesar at his office, where he's still working on his megalopolis project. She asks him to return her letter before he reads it, explaining that it was written in the heat of the moment due to his treatment of Cicero. However, Caesar tells her he's already read it and found it witty, though also insulting. Julia carefully examines his office and notices numerous medications and empty bottles. Curious about his psychological issues, she asks more questions, but Caesar brushes her off, saying he prefers to talk with intelligent people who are interested in science and art, not those who spend their lives at parties. This attitude angers Julia, and she insists he knows nothing about her. Before leaving, she confesses that she saw him stop time, and that his extraordinary powers didn't affect her. Shocked by this revelation, Caesar's perspective on Julia changes, and he invites her to follow him. They walk into a room filled with a model of his ideal future city. Caesar asks Julia to walk through it with her eyes closed and tell him what she sees.
Oh, because of the rain.
Before Julia's eyes, a utopian vision unfolds, and Caesar insists that all great cities grow alongside their inhabitants. During a parade supporting Cicero, Julia tries to convince her father that Caesar is actually a good man and that he truly wants to change the world for the better. Cicero calls his daughter a traitor and declares that he doesn't believe a single word the architect says. At that moment, the mayor's parade is paused to let Caesar's car cross the street, which only angers Cicero even more. That night, Caesar struggles to focus on his work as memories of his late wife flood his mind, while Julia, in the meantime, delves into the investigation of her mother's death. She learns that the woman drowned, and her body disappeared during the investigation. This revelation leaves a strong impression on Julia, and she decides to follow Caesar. She tracks his car, unaware that Claudio, with a camera in hand, is also tailing his cousin. Along the way, Caesar chats with his driver, Fundi Roman, about the fleeting nature of time. As they drive through the city's slums, the architect becomes lost in thought about the injustices of the world. The dirt, poverty, and decay trigger strange hallucinations in his mind, where statues come to life, crumbling under the weight of their horrific reality. Then they stop, and Caesar gets out of the car to buy flowers, which confuses Julia. After a while, Caesar finally reaches a mysterious building. Seeing the architect, the security guard disables the alarm, and Caesar enters a luxurious room, where several women are attending to his wife. Julia follows Caesar but soon realizes that there is no one in the room. His wife is merely a product of his unique imagination. Julia understands that Caesar is still deeply in love with his wife and decides not to interfere. The next day, Caesar and Julia head to the top of a skyscraper, where they discuss the future of Megalopolis. Julia asks which institution will be the most important in the city, and Caesar answers without hesitation that it will be marriage. Soon, the elite of New Rome and media representatives gather for a celebration of the wedding between Crassus and Wow, organized in ancient Roman style. Caesar and Julia arrive at the event together, and journalists bombard them with provocative questions, particularly about the safety of Megalon. Caesar reassures everyone once again that the material is completely safe. To prove this, young pop star Vesta appears before the public in a unique dress made of Megalon, equipped with millions of tiny cameras that create an illusion of invisibility. Soon, the guests gather around the festive table. Caesar makes a toast, wishing happiness to the newlyweds and prosperity to the entire family. He then joins his mysterious mother, who clearly disapproves of his obsession with Utopia and his connection with Julia.
I think maybe alligators have the right idea.
What's that?
They eat their young.
The ancient Roman celebration then continues with chariot races and gladiator battles. Meanwhile, Julia gives an interview to some aspiring journalists and learns that rumors have spread about her romance with Caesar. Caesar, in another room, is taking banned substances and signing autographs for his adoring fans. Next, acrobats appear in the arena, and Julia tries to control Caesar's behavior with the power of her mind, but the architect remains trapped in his hallucinations and memories. At the same time, Claudio, disguised as a Roman woman, forces the cameraman to play a certain video during Vesta's performance. It turns out that the girl gained popularity by pledging to maintain her innocence, and for the sake of her purity, the wealthy are more willing to donate to the needs of New Rome. Soon, Vesta appears in the arena. Everyone admires her performance, and the collection reaches about $100 million. But suddenly, compromising footage starts airing on the screens, showing her having sex with Caesar. The outraged audience boos Vesta and calls her a deceiver. Chaos breaks out, and part of the crowd breaks through onto the arena. Cicero tries to calm them down, blaming Caesar for everything, but no one listens to him. Then, security steps in and uses force on the angry spectators. However, they don't stop and soon begin calling for Cicero's resignation. The crazed crowd eventually reaches Caesar, whose mind is still clouded. Soon, Julia finds the beaten and disoriented architect and rushes to take him home. But on the way, their car is stopped by the police, and Caesar is arrested for allegedly being involved with the underage Vesta. Julia desperately tries to defend Caesar, but nothing works, and Fundi drives her home. After some time, Caesar regains consciousness in his cell and realizes that he has lost the ability to stop time. That same night, Julia and her friend sneak into the archives. There, they discover documents proving that Vesta lied not only about her innocence but also about her age and place of birth. The next morning, Julia goes to her father's office and informs him that Vesta is actually 23 years old, and the video that Claudio spread is a fake. She claims that the documents prove Caesar's innocence, but Cicero insists that the architect is morally guilty. The mayor refuses to release Caesar and tears up Vesta's birth certificate. Disappointed, Julia promises to get a copy of the document, then seeks help from Crassus. At Crassus' mansion, she is met by Wow. As they ride the elevator, Wow warns Julia to stay away from her family, as both Crassus and Caesar, along with their wealth, belong to her. Meanwhile, Claudio tries to mend his relationship with his uncle, hoping to become the heir to the bank. But Crassus suspects that it was Claudio who set up his cousin, as he had envied him since childhood. Soon, the truth about Vesta spreads through all the media, and Caesar is released from prison. Some time later, Julia visits Caesar on the rooftop of the skyscraper. The architect regrets losing his superpower and admits that he feels guilty for his wife's death because he didn't give her enough attention. Julia tries to comfort him, assuring him that he is not to blame. Then, she extends her hand to Caesar and asks him to try stopping time for her. Hesitating a little, he takes her hand and asks time to stop once more, and this time, he succeeds. Seeing that his abilities have returned, Caesar, overwhelmed, pulls Julia close, and they kiss. In the following weeks, Caesar continues to actively work on the Megalopolis project and enjoys his relationship with Julia. One day, he tries to introduce the girl to his strange mother, but she simply declares that because of Julia, he will soon forget all about her. Meanwhile, the poor begin to protest against Caesar due to the demolition of their homes. Claudio decides to use the public's discontent for his own gain. He leads the protests and becomes one of the most influential people in the city. Cicero's advisor, Nash Berman, informs him that Claudio is gaining more and more supporters, and the mayor demands that this issue be resolved as quickly as possible. However, he soon learns even worse news. The old Soviet satellite, which was supposed to fall on Labrador, is now approaching New Rome. The debris from the satellite destroys much of the city. However, Caesar believes that this tragedy will only help him rebuild his utopia. The architect once again immerses himself in the work on Megalopolis, but memories of his late wife continue to torment him, both in his dreams and in reality. One morning, Julia informs Caesar that she is pregnant. Excited, the architect immediately proposes to her, but Julia refuses, as he is still emotionally attached to his late wife. Soon, Julia's parents arrive for a visit, and Caesar shows her mother, Teresa, an attraction that allows her to see their bright future. During a poker game, Cicero observes that any utopia will eventually turn into a dystopia, but Caesar insists on the necessity of striving for an ideal world, as humanity has always progressed in this direction. Suddenly, Julia announces her pregnancy to her parents. Her mother rejoices at the wonderful news, while Cicero is shocked. Concerned, Julia reminds her father that she could never love a bad man. But Cicero remains hostile toward Caesar, and he and his wife quickly leave their daughter's house. Julia, in tears, worries that she has broken her father's heart and fears that her and Caesar's dream of a new world might be unattainable. Meanwhile, Claudio continues to strengthen his position among most of the residents of New Rome, calling for the overthrow of both Cicero and Caesar. Berman, sent by Cicero, fails to stop his plans, losing his life in the satellite crash. Some time later, Cicero visits Caesar in his office and asks him to end his relationship with Julia. In exchange, he offers to give him a document confirming his innocence in the death of his wife and promises to publicly support all of Caesar's ideas. Cicero gives the architect 3 days to think it over, but Caesar firmly rejects his offer. The architect then meets with Wow, who promises to steal Crassus' bank and give it to Caesar if he agrees to marry her. However, he ignores her offer as well, and in a fit of rage, Wow blocks all his accounts. Meanwhile, the media increasingly highlight the dangers of Megalon, and public support for Caesar gradually wanes. One evening, a boy approaches Caesar's car to ask for his autograph. The architect engages in a friendly conversation with the child, but suddenly the boy pulls out a gun and shoots Caesar in the head. Fundy and Julia, who are nearby, immediately rush Caesar to the hospital in critical condition. While doctors fight to save the architect's life, attempting to repair his skull with Megalon, Caesar is immersed in a stream of vivid hallucinations.
Time stop!
It soon becomes clear that the boy was sent by Claudio henchmen. However, this decision infuriates Claudio, as the attempted assassination turns Caesar into a martyr in the eyes of the common people. The surgery is successful, and Julia stays by the unfortunate Caesar's side. He continues to experience persistent hallucinations and unexpectedly decides to tell Julia the truth about his wife's death. It turns out that one day she discovered something that triggered intense jealousy in her. The woman jumped into a car and sped off into the unknown. Caesar tried to chase her but only saw her plunge off a bridge into the icy waters. It was then that he began working with Megalon, trying to save her, but he failed. When Caesar is discharged from the hospital, he heads to WoW to resolve the issue of his accounts being blocked. The upset journalist reminds him that her position allows her to make any decisions at Crassus' bank. Suddenly, Caesar removes the bandage from his face and discovers a massive Megalon implant in place of his bone. Shocked, WoW falls to her knees before Caesar and once again begs him to come back to her. She even attempts to hypnotize him, but their moment is interrupted by Crassus, who invites his nephew to his office. Caesar asks his unsuspecting uncle about his accounts, but Crassus insists there's been some kind of mistake and asks WoW to fix it. Rejected by Caesar, WoW decides to pursue an affair with Claudio. As they make love, the lights begin to flicker. Claudio explains that this is happening because Caesar's growing megalopolis is consuming more and more energy. Wow reveals that Crassus insisted on a prenuptial agreement that prevents her from inheriting the bank, so she and Claudio need to seize control of it. She also cuts off Claudio's long hair to give him a more professional look, one that will impress Crassus. Following WOW's plan, Claudio convinces his uncle to appoint him as the bank's interim director. Crassus praises his nephew for his maturity and seriousness, signing the document without hesitation. But then, Crassus, horrified, realizes that by signing the document, he has just given Claudio full control over the bank. Unable to bear the betrayal, he suffers a heart attack and, before losing consciousness, vows revenge. Months later, Caesar and Julia welcome a child, and Fundy announces them as husband and wife in a modest ceremony right in the back of a car.
I now pronounce you husband and wife.
Meanwhile, the time of the Saturnalia, the ancient Roman equivalent of Christmas, arrives, and all the residents of New Rome indulge in various pleasures. Wow and Claudio prepare for the final removal of Crassus from his position. Additionally, Claudio hasn't forgotten about the protests against Caesar and Cicero. Cicero organizes rallies in support of the city's development, calling Claudio and his followers bandits who threaten their prosperity. However, soon, mass riots organized by Claudio spread throughout the city. While the police try to disperse the protesters, Cicero, with his wife, daughter, and granddaughter, is forced to flee New Rome by subway. Holding his granddaughter in his arms, Cicero continues to criticize Caesar, calling him a reckless dreamer who will destroy the world rather than build a better one. But Julia pleads with her father to simply trust Caesar. Meanwhile, Wow and Claudio visit the bedridden Crassus, mocking him in various ways. Crassus pretends to be mad, feigning excitement while secretly hiding a bow and arrows under his cloak, preparing for revenge. The wealthy man takes WOW's life, shooting her in the chest, and wounds Claudio with several arrows, though he manages to escape. Finally, after completing Megalopolis, Caesar addresses the people, presenting his vision of an ideal world where every individual is valued, regardless of their origin. Moved by his speech, Crassus leaves all his wealth to Caesar and his megalopolis. The people who once supported Claudio realize that his claims were all lies, and they take justice into their own hands. On New Year's, an inspired crowd arrives in Megalopolis to celebrate the beginning of a new life. Cicero and his wife join Caesar, Julia, and their daughter, and in the midst of the cheering Romans, the architect is surprised and overjoyed to see his mother. Cicero asks the architect to build a worthy future for his granddaughter and finally reconciles with him. Caesar asks Julia to stop time, and they freeze in a kiss. Everything around them freezes as well, except for their daughter, who will grow up in a new world of equality and freedom. What would your dream city look like? Drop your ideas in the comments down below, give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Catch you in the next video.